Reverend Ryan, and we are Soul Evolution Collaborative, and this is Stripped Down Sunday. And so we're super excited. I'm super excited to have this time with you to kind of delve in deeper into spirituality, what it means to be human, especially what it means to be human in the world in which we live today, and hopefully a new take on life in a unique Soul Evolution Collaborative way. So we have stripped down your Sunday morning experience to offer you a streamlined approach to kind of our topic. So you can watch live now or, watch in the future, whatever way works for you throughout the week. And so it's our desire to bring an updated message to the world. And I think we all can agree that this is a time where we need it more than ever. And so the Soul Evolution Collaborative is really dedicated to personal transformation and how that personal transformation shows up in the world through communal evolution. So 2 really quick things before we jump in, some logistics to kind of get out of the way. 1, everything you need to know about this community, Soul Evolution Collaborative, can be found on our website, soulevolutioncollaborative.org. And so go there, poke around a little bit, see what the offerings are, and see the programs that go on throughout the week and how they can best meet your needs as you go throughout your week. Number 2, it's communities like ours. We're not the only ones doing it, obviously, but we're participating in this mission to bring really real change to the world and creating a world that works for everyone. And so if you are in any way able to support this mission, we gratefully accept your donation and support, and all donations can be made at our website, soulevolutioncollaborative.org. All right, so let's dive into the topic of the week. So this whole month, we've been talking about a body of wisdom. And we talked about listening to our bodies. We talked about how our bodies remember. And so today's topic is the one body. Taking a deep breath. I think we've all been taking a deep breath over the past few days. I'm tired. And I'm sure you're tired. Hell, we are all tired. And why is that? I begin lately to read, why am I so tired? Not this kind of like physical tired, but this like existential tired, this heaviness. And I think what's come to my mind is this relentless doing that we're in, this relentless achieving, this idea of rugged individualism, and honestly, the fight, the struggle for freedom, the fight for justice, the fight for equality. We stand up to injustices, and we are tired. I am tired. And why is that? And I think this comes from that this is not how we were created to exist. This divine blueprint, this blueprint of my body, which is the blueprint of your body, which is the blueprint of the collective body. We weren't designed to deal with a lot of the things that we're seeing. It's just not how we were created to exist. And it's just not encompassed in the divine blueprint of our lives. And so what do? We begin to listen and gradually find ways to return back to that blueprint. And, right now what we're experiencing, especially in this country, we're experiencing the collectively as a result of living in such a way that we were not meant to. We see that in the attack on LGBTQIA plus community and rights. We see that on the attack of women's rights, the injustices, the inequalities that we see. This is the outpicturing of a life collectively not in alignment with the blueprint of how we were created. And so it's really interesting. I've been reading a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller. And this book came into my experience. And I thought, oh, this is a great, book to read. I have a long list of books. And this, seemed in alignment with some of the things that I've been doing in the world, especially some work around grief, teaching and instructing. And so I thought, well, it's a great book to read, to kind of put in my repertoire. I had no idea just the sheer amazing timing, I'll just call it that, of reading this book, and then this just feeling of this heaviness. And so I think that what we're experiencing now, we've experienced in the past few years, and honestly, if we look back even further than that, this collective body, this one body that is humanity, that is the world, that is the universe, this one collective body, we've experienced and continue to experience collective grief. Grief over injustice, grief over inequality, grief over loss of rights. And we feel this now, especially now. And so Francis Weller talks about in his book these 5 gates of grief. And these are just really 5 areas where we experience this grief, this bone shaking grief. And he talks about the first gate, when we love what we love, we know that we will lose. And this is this reality of this impermanence of life. And I think that we can see this when we look at loved ones and we realize that things do not go on forever, that things change quickly. And we grieve those. We grieve that impermanence and all the instability that brings about. Another gate that he talked about is we grieve the places that have not known love. And so these are places of unspoken emotions, unspoken traumas, shame, those things that we don't bring out to the surface. And so the thoughts or the experiences that we keep hidden. And so we kind of feel this grief around that, not only as individuals, but collectively. Those collective shames, those collective traumas that we experience, those things that we are afraid to talk about, especially in spiritual communities. Oftentimes we shy away from talking about the things that are challenging, the things that are just heartbreaking in our lives, because there's this idea that we always have to show up happy, and if we're not happy, then we're not doing it right, all that sort of stuff. But we grieve those things, those deep wounds and traumas that often we have not been allowed to share. He also talks about another gate of grief is the sorrows of the world. And I think that is what we are experiencing now, at least for me. It's just this heaviness of the sorrows of the world, of the things we see on TV, the things that our loved ones experience, the things that we may be experiencing. Just this collective yearning for something other than what we're seeing. He also talks about grieving the things that we expected and did not receive, whether it's a love of someone or a support of a community that we did not receive. And then he talks about ancestral grief that is layered over time, that grief that our bodies hold. And we've talked about our bodies holding in stuff that the body remembers. And this is not just something that happened, 2 days ago or 20 years ago, but this collective ancestral grief that kind of just gets in our psyche and in our bones and then becomes outpictured if it's not healed and addressed. And so Francis Weller talks about that grief is not experienced alone. That is the collective nature of grief, this place where grief really speaks to our own interconnection, because it is a universal experience. And so that it's not experienced alone, and therefore it cannot be healed alone. And so, I struggle with the right words or the right answers, as if I'm the one that's supposed to have an answer to what we are seeing in our world. And I'll be honest, I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas about how we can begin to move and to heal and to look at these systems, look at these oppressions, look at these things in our world, and really begin to kind of see what's underneath, and how looking at those things, those deep-rooted things that are below the surface, and apply the healing balm there, and then out picturing. And one of the things I think that for me in this experience has been really important is this awareness of the importance of vulnerability, the importance of saying, hey, I don't have all the answers, the importance of saying it's a really scary time, the importance of saying that what is out picturing is not how I want it to be or how it even should be. And it's not in alignment with who we are. And so I was reading a work by a psychotherapist, and her name is Marian Greenspan. And I think this little quote that I'm getting ready to read you really spoke to me of our next steps. Like, what are we being called to do now? Not only as individuals, not only as spiritual communities, but this collective of people that are yearning to live in alignment with the blueprint. And so she says, when she's talking about, she coins this term called intervulnerability, or being intervulnerable, which I had never heard before. And let me tell you, after you hear this quote, it is just a game changer for me. And so when she was asked, what is meant by intervulnerability, or to be intervulnerable? She says, when I say we are intervulnerable, I mean that we suffer together, whether consciously or unconsciously. Albert Einstein called the idea of a separate self an optical delusion of consciousness. Martin Luther King Jr. said that we are all connected in an inescapable web of mutuality. There is no way out, though we try to escape by armoring ourselves against pain, and in the process, we diminish our lives and our consciousness. But in our intervulnerability is our salvation, because awareness of the mutuality of suffering impels us to search for ways to heal the whole, rather than encase ourselves in a bubble of denial and impossible individualism. At this point in history, it seems that we will either destroy ourselves or find a way to build a sustainable life together. And I'm telling you, that just hit me. Isn't that it? This when we practice this intervulnerability, this idea of interconnection, this idea that the decisions that have been made over the past couple of days do not just affect one people group, it affects us all. And that each decision, each thing is not void, it's not in a vacuum, but instead it affects who we are as humans on this kind of collective level. And so when we see those injustices, when we see those things, that call of that intervulnerability is our salvation, because this idea that we are collectively experiencing that we are collectively experiencing this, if we see it as a collective experience, that we're all interconnected, then when we seek to heal that experience, it is not just seeking to heal our own individual experience in the world, but moving us toward a collective healing. And really, that is the only way that we can build a sustainable life together, a life that is in alignment with the blueprint of who and what we are, divine expressions of the one thing, that one body, that our individual bodies are part of this collective. And according to eco-psychologist, cellist Glendenning, we are part of an original unfoldment in the natural world called the primal matrix. It sounds kind of exciting. The primal matrix is it's embedded, that we are embedded in this interconnectedness of life. And that's how we were created, coming in this really interconnected way. And this is the only way that we really perceived our life, and this really intimate understanding of the world with no trace of separation between human and the more than human. And so what we're seeing now, where there was once this kind of seamless embrace, this divine blueprint of this seamless embrace of the human and the beyond human realm, this no separation, no barriers, nothing that gets in the way of that blueprint. What we're seeing now is breach in that. That disconnection, that seeming separation that we experience or that we are seeing. Glendinning calls this our original trauma. And out of this trauma, of this kind of breach of that collective embrace, we often see it outpictured as anxiety or depression or distrust or hypervigilance, disconnection. Can you see it? We're seeing that now. And so as a result, we're left with this kind of profound feeling of loneliness and isolation and heaviness. And we rarely acknowledge these or even have the words for it. And I think the time is to begin to acknowledge that what we are experiencing is a result of that breach, that separation that kind of causes this like low-level hum of grief and disconnect in our life. Sometimes I can hear it in my own life. And so this idea of isolation has profound effects on how we move and interact in the world. And so I feel like our soul flickers a little dim sometimes, but it's this kinship, this entire breathing world, that when we try to defend our own little small shell of a world, linguist David Hitton calls it the relentless industry of the self. When we just focus on this one little part that affects us in our day-to-day, then we miss the breathing world, this kinship, and our expression, our ability to live fully is diminished because of that. And so by looking at beyond this relentless industry of the self and understanding this collective experience of the body, and that nothing is independent, nothing that we see, the things that we don't see, down to the very smallest molecular level, we are not independent, but we are interdependent on one another. We are interdependent on the planet. We are interdependent on the universe. And the more that we can step back and breathe that in, we can begin to understand the power of community, and not just a family community or a social community, but this kind of collective experience of humanity. And when we begin to do that, even to turn our attention to it, even for a moment, then we can begin to see how this understanding of our connection to one another is our salvation, is not salvation in the sense of sin and salvation, but is our way, is the gateway to creating a world that works for everyone, is the gateway to this intervulnerability, is the gateway of living a life that we were meant to live, the gateway to leaning into this blueprint and to releasing the things that we've absorbed that are unlike that are incongruent with this blueprint. That is the source of our existential angst, I should say, or my existential angst, is when I live in a way that's not incongruent with who I am. And so when we understand the symbiotic nature of all things, we can begin to understand our responsibility, not for each other, but to each other. That when one person grieves, we all grieve. When one person loves, we all love. And that our collective community is supported and sustained and maintained by our desire to return to love and peace and understanding. And this doesn't mean that we don't stand up for injustices. We do. And that's how standing up for the truth, standing up for what is right, standing up for what supports who we are collectively, that is the gateway of this collective healing, which we need so very much. And it starts with me. It starts with you. It starts with each of us. Understanding how we can enact this healing in our own sphere. And knowing as we do that, it becomes a ripple effect. We've seen it so many times, over and over again. And so now is the time to continue, this work of this personal transformation and taking what we embodying that in everything that we do. And it spills over into this communal evolution, this communal understanding of the blueprint, and creates this container for us to live that in very real ways. So I'd like to leave you with the words of Francis Weller, who is now my new best friend, because this book is amazing. He says, "We are meant to embody a vivid and animated life. Live close to our wild souls, our wild bodies, and our wild minds. The wild within and the wild without are kin, enlivening one another."